Welcome, pudding people, to another episode of Everybody Loves Pudding. We are your hosts, Ken Seymour and Richard Geiger. How are you, Richard?
I'm doing fantastic. And yourself?
I am as good as could possibly be the case in the current environment that we live in. And no, actually, I'm doing great. I can't, there's nothing to complain about at the moment. Give me, a few minutes and that could change.
Indeed.
But we are excited today. We have a fantastic guest to bring to you, nice pudding people out there. We have actor, producer, director, magician, martial artist, man about the world, Mr. Richard Manley. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me. It's going to be exciting. I have a lot to tell you.
Well, that's great, because I always prefer to listen than to talk, just because I'm lazy by nature. So let's start with the basics. I normally like to go a little chronological with this, but I want to get kind of the cool stuff that's coming up, started first. You've got a new television show coming out on Tubi here very shortly. It's magic and it's culture and it's travel. What is this, and what are you trying to accomplish here?
So the show is, there's a lot of different components to it, but ideally it started with my grandfather, who was he was the inspiration, but he traveled around the world as a surgeon. He lived in Boston and Massachusetts, and that's where his practice was, and he worked there. But in the 40s, they taught surgeons how to be better with their hands, so they taught them sleight of hand and magic. So he learned all of that, which made him a better surgeon. But he was also fascinated by other cultures and indigenous people who he visited, that so he could also get a better understanding of their medicinal practices, like in the Amazon, where there was herbs, and he met shamans there, and then in Tibet, healing practices of meditation and breathing practices. So he went around and he met these people, and then he was also just an avid adventurer. He'd climb mountains, he would do all these crazy things, but he kept a journal and a record of all these places that he went. And so I developed the show based on this travel journal that he left me after he passed. And he's the one that taught me magic when I was 10 years old. So I said to myself, okay, well, I could visit all these places that's in this journal. It's basically like a roadmap. And then from there, figure out what he was trying to learn, and see the world through my own eyes, opposed to, what he saw. And so I visited these places. We're starting to shoot these episodes. Peru is the first one. And I got to meet the shamans in the Amazon and a tribe there. And then we went out to see the Quechua in the Andes. And it's just been a great experience of just getting to meet these cultures and learn about how there's an integration within all of them. You have tribes in Africa like the Himba, in Ethiopia and Omo Valley, and then you have tribes in the Amazon, but their way of thinking, their belief system and traditions, their stories are different, but there's a lot of similarities in them. And so part of this show is me using my magic to kind of bridge that gap for a language barrier, and just a barrier of the West versus other, not versus, but compared to other cultures. And the magic really helps them to kind of be like, whoa, wow, this is amazing. Let's share something with him about us. And it's just been a great experience. And I hope when you guys watch this that you'll get to see that too, in all of it.
It sounds pretty fascinating. When I heard about it, it kind of combines a lot of things that make human interaction very interesting, and discovery is a big part of that. That's a key aspect to magic, but it's also a key aspect to a lot of different things. One thing that occurred to me, though, you've got this roadmap, you've got the diary, and you've got some help. Did you have to have some local support to help bridge even further? Because I can expect with the language and the dialects and the I don't know if it's drastic differences, but I would expect sometimes in the behavioral aspect it would be a little difficult to interact in the way that you maybe would want to.
Yeah, different. It's interesting because different cultures have a different take on magic too. So we do hire fixers and different people in the country, guides that will come with us, because some areas, you know, you need to have somebody who can speak the language, just because you can't just walk into a community and start doing magic. You know, they get freaked out, you know, who is this person, you know, and what are they doing? So it's good to have somebody who's there who can communicate and say, okay, this is an individual who's going to show you something, but also to kind of make them aware that what I'm doing isn't, you know, real magic. Because, you know, some tribes and communities, especially in Papua New Guinea or Indonesia, they're very, they believe in real magic. So when you come in and you do something like that, it's to them, it's real. And so it could be in many cases dangerous for me and other people if they consider that as something that's not good. So we always make sure that we take those precautions. We bring people with us who can, you know, kind of say, okay, this is just for show, but he's trying to do it to entertain you, and I hope you have a good time, you know. So, yeah.
I'm curious about the logistics behind all of this, in a certain sense, where this is a large undertaking, right? There's a lot of money involved. There's a lot of travel to different countries, a lot of clearances to get when going through all these countries. So how did that process all the way back at the beginning start with getting enough money or getting the approval to do this show?
So my business partner who I work with, because I have a production company here in Los Angeles, he handles most of funding. He's an accountant, and he handles a lot of the funding aspects. But before even the funding starts, I do a massive amount of research. I mean, my coffee tables are full of books, and, you know, my bedroom is books sprawled all over the floor. You know, so I read a lot about the culture, the area, the travel history, you know, different individuals throughout history that have traveled there, just so I get a real clear understanding of where I'm going. And then I have maps. So I basically go through the maps. I look at, you know, all the places that of interest to me, research the different people that are there. And then once I get a good understanding of where the journey is going to be, and a lot of it's based on, you know, reviewing my grandfather's journal as well. Okay, he went here, he went here. So how can we go there, but make it interesting to go there along the way? So where can we visit along the way that's interesting? And then I'll look at the adventure activities, the things we can do, the rock climbing, the either scuba diving or whitewater kayaking, flying planes, or anything like that, anything adventure oriented to get there. And so I'll make lists, I'll do all this, and then I present it to my business partner. We say, okay, this is how much this is going to cost, this, and that. And we end up, you know, he goes to people who he has that are interested in environmental conservation, indigenous cultures, and basically raising the money based on the idea that this is something that is not only an adventure where it's entertaining for people, but there's a message in it that it's about, like I said, cultural integration, where you can see the similarities in all of these people, but also how the modern world is affecting them, which is very important because, you know, some of the tribes in Africa, you have people coming to visit them, but in a way it's kind of sad because it's kind of like a zoo, because you pay to see them, but you don't really get to really enjoy or appreciate who they are as people, because you're just paying to see them, take a photo and this and that. But I think it's very important for tourists and people who are traveling to these countries to understand that these are people and their ways of life are being threatened by the modern world and building and cutting down forests and all this. It's pushing their land out. So these are important topics to discuss, which are in the show. And a lot of the people we've approached for funding and all this are very interested in these kind of things as well. So we have a lot of support in that.
Nice.
That sounds like a massive undertaking, but something really fulfilling.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so you say, okay, I got to throw back just a little bit. This is the way I am. Scatterbrained, got to go all over the place. You talked about learning a little bit from, or learning from your grandfather, the love for magic, and that it was the prestidigitation and the finger dexterity for his work. Did he take that love to not just kind of up close and personal magic, but also stage magic? Is that where you got kind of some of your interest there, or did you kind of get the love for that just from what you learned and just kind of took the ball and ran with it?
Yeah, he was more sleight of hand. So he did a lot of card tricks. He would do things with coins too. So he was very good at that. And the stage magic element, I was fascinated with it. The smaller stuff that he did kind of piqued my interest in the bigger stuff. So I watched different magic shows that were on TV where they'd be doing big stage illusions, and I was interested in that. But for me, the intimacy of doing a trick in front of a small group of people, or even if it's a large group of people, some of the places, in Egypt and other countries, there are large groups of people circled around me. And I think for me, that's on a personal level, it's more challenging because you have to manage a large crowd or a small group of people. And particularly the psychology of it and the sociology of it, where group think is happening, where people are looking, eyeballs are looking. You want to make sure you're constantly engaging with people, and while doing the sleight of hand. So it's more rewarding for me as a magician to perform where I know I have to manage a bunch of different things, and so it's fun. But also I like the intimate setting where people can be right there and see what's going on, rather than sitting in seats and watching a big stage show. There was always a disconnect for me, and it was always more of a performance rather than an engaging whole. And so I got into some of the bigger stage stuff, and I would show my family and my mother and my grandmother when I came up with these things. I have two brothers, and I would like dupe them into being the assistant and jumping in the box and chaining them up and then making them disappear and appear behind them. But that didn't last long. It was a phase, and I just always went back to card stuff, David Blaine street magic, Chris Angel street magic, where it was just all very just right there. You took ordinary objects and you did extraordinary things with them, and that's what I like.
Well, and to that point, here's the real question that I have, kind of why I asked the first one there. The experience of witnessing magic performance, whether it's stage magic or personal, in person, is often drastically different than seeing it on a television program. So you lose something a lot of times when it's transitioning between the two mediums. How did you approach the process of editing or putting the work together in such a way so that you would be able to preserve the effect, the impact that you wanted your magic to have in the show?
That was difficult because, especially when we're traveling, we had a small crew when we were in Peru, which is our first episode, and we had 2 cameras, and then we had one of our team members actually was using a GoPro, because I strongly recommended we should have at least 3 or 4 cameras, because when you're shooting, you want to do the trick and you want to capture as much of it organically as you can. So, if I'm doing a trick for somebody or an illusion or an effect, you want to have a camera that has a wide shot so you're seeing everything. You want to have one camera designated to just the hands, so you're seeing the hands. And then you want to have one camera for the reactions. And then you can have another camera that's kind of, going back and forth to everything, which is an added bonus. It was difficult because we were very limited and we were on the go a lot. So we were stuck a lot of times with 2 cameras. So I oftentimes had to be doing the trick and tell the camera team, okay, look, so we're here, we're in the mountains, we had to climb up here. We had to haul a lot of gear. So, we're very light on our equipment. And so as I'm doing the trick, I need you to watch. I'll normally rehearse it with them and say, okay, this is the moment where I need you to see their face. It's very important that we see their reaction to the trick, because that's the biggest thing. You want to see how people react to what you're showing them. And there were moments where one of the camera guys was shooting it and he was staying on my hands, and I had to kind of look at him and say, get the faces, and I'm like, here. And he's like, oh. So it was an interesting experience just because of the logistics of this rugged travel. But but we got it. We got it.
Now, did you have any, I don't know if I'll call them an idol or maybe a person of reference? Because you'd mentioned David Blaine and Chris Angel, and of course your grandfather. Did you have people growing up who you based your magic off of, or who inspired you to do things, or grow off of what you had seen from them?
I think really, I read a lot of books. So there's a lot of books on magic that I read too. And I watched David Blaine, I watched Chris Angel, but a lot of both of them, you know, they have characters that they portray. You know, David Blaine is more, it's a shaman type of character who he's very intense in his magic. And then Chris Angel has a character who's very shock oriented in his magic. I mean, they're very much them, but they're a character to it. So for me, in my magic, I never created the illusion or the idea of that I had real magic or real powers. So I think some of the people that interested me the most were the people that you don't really see on TV, because there's a lot of indie magicians, I guess you would call them, that create magic effects that you watch them and they're basically, they're more skill oriented. They'll do a lot of card flourishes and they'll do a lot of sleight of hand, but nothing is ever implied that they have real magic. It's entertaining. And so I enjoyed that organic presentation of magic where you're just kind of yourself. You do the magic trick, you do it. We all know it's a trick. We're not trying to tell anybody we have real magical abilities. And so I think for me, I always just kind of stayed true to who I was. If I was going to mess up a trick, and that happened quite often when I was going through my, I guess, magic career of learning, I would go through bars and I worked as a server and I worked as a bartender. And a lot of the times the magic tricks would just mess up and I wouldn't get them correct. But as you do more magic, you always have this backup upon backup upon backup, because you realize that the audience never really knows what you're doing. So if you're doing a trick for somebody and it's just this fun thing and you mess up, you turn that into part of the trick, and then you continue on a different line. So there's all these different paths to get to the end result of entertaining someone, but you have to be quick on your feet, and that's something, I guess, it just happens through repetition, from doing it at bars, from doing it at restaurants, of learning that messing up is okay. It's part of your personality, and again, we don't have to present the fact that we have real powers. It's entertaining. So you can make a joke about it. You can make light about it, as long as it's entertaining people. So that's kind of where I developed my style, is just trial and error. Magicians people don't really see, and just being myself, really.
Side question: as you were working as a bartender, what was the most difficult drink for you to make?
Well, that's the problem. I got fired as a bartender because the problem was I didn't last very long. I was doing more magic for people than making drinks. So all the other bartenders, there was, two others that were taking over for me as I was doing tricks for everyone. And I remember the manager would say, "Look, Rich, I would fire you if it wasn't for the fact that you bring in customers for your magic. So I'll keep you on, but you need to make more drinks." So eventually he had to let me go. But that's another, that probably leads into another subject where, for me, I always had a tough time with whenever I had a job, maintaining that job, because I always wanted to entertain or do some sort of creative thing for the people that I was around. So to answer your question, I don't even know what the hardest drink was, because I rarely made them. So
Didn't make them.
yeah. So.
Well, maintaining is important. I mean, there's maybe nothing more important than maintaining what is important, that core of what you're developing for yourself. And to that end, I want to remind everybody out there to visit us on social media. We are at Real Pudding Guys on Twitter. We are at Pudding Guys on Facebook and on Instagram. And we are at Pudding Guys on Patreon, where for only $1 a month, you can support us as we get new equipment to sound better, to look better, to do better, to be better. But back on to our regularly scheduled program. Smooth transition. Did that work for you?
That works. That works.
So, okay. And I had to wonder about this too. A little snippet in your history. And you got some of this love of cultures and magic from family, but I also saw that you studied martial arts. A lot of times, love of other cultures can often come from that, because truthfully speaking, there really isn't an American martial arts to really, not technically, although the one that you studied is maybe the closest. How did you get into that?
Yeah, so I think, again, like you said, my fascination with travel and other cultures and other places kind of led me into martial arts. And I had always been a big fan of Indiana Jones, so I loved the Indiana Jones movies. And I always thought growing up that I could be that and be running away from, bad guys after stealing a sacred object. And then I realized maybe it's not as fun as it looks in the movies to actually be doing that. But yeah, so I started martial arts when I was about 12 years old, and it was another thing where whatever I do, I tend to get very intensely involved in, and I like to take it 100%. So the martial arts thing started when I saw Bruce Lee movies, Jackie Chan movies, and I was very much interested in Kung Fu, but I didn't realize it was Kung Fu at the time because I was still learning. And so I just wanted to get any kind of martial arts experience that I could. So I joined the local school, which was Kempo Karate, which again, yeah, is probably a more Americanized version of Japanese karate. And so I started learning there, and within 4 years, 3 years actually, I was practicing a lot. It was like 3.5. I got my black belt, and I started teaching there. So I taught there. I was very close with my sensei, and we actually then from there started traveling to New York, because I said to him, the karate is great, but it's very stiff. I want to be like Jet Li, Jackie Chan, where these guys are moving and it's fluid and it's beautiful and powerful and all these stances and everything. And so he was like, well, that's more Kung Fu. And so I started researching all of that. And when we went to New York, I met up with Shifu it was Ip Poi, who was of the Ip Man lineage, four down from the Ip Man lineage. And so I learned Wing Chun. And I got my black sash in Wing Chun, then started training Shaolin Kung Fu with the Shaolin monks who came over from China with they were a performance team, and they came to Flushing. And that was when I fell in love with it again, because that was the style, Kung Fu, and the Shaolin style, which was what I really wanted to do. So I would train 8 hours a day. My teen years old, like 17, 18, 19, I was training 8 hours a day and just wanted to just absorb as much of it as I could. And so really during that time, it was magic and Shaolin martial arts that was my core focus and passion of what I was doing. And that really did lead into a lot of other things. I always say that martial arts is it's more of like a big body, like magic, I would say is small muscle skills, where martial arts is big muscle skills and big learning and big movements, where magic and martial arts have a similarity in that it takes a diligent mind, it takes determination and persistence to get better at it. But the martial arts for me was something that was an ongoing thing that helped me never give up on whatever I was doing, whether it was rock climbing, which I got into, and then these other things like scuba diving or other activities like extreme mountain biking, where I always remember the martial arts and the teachings of, stay focused, don't give up, and no matter what, you'll get better, you'll progress, So it was a good experience to train.
Well, a lot of discipline too. Discipline and practice, practice, practice.
Yeah, yeah.
So, okay. So now that I've opened the door to the martial arts, which is a huge interest of mine, just in kind of a scholarly pursuit, because ask me to do any sort of reverse spin kick or anything, and I'll probably fall pretty easily. But I've always enjoyed the culture that created these, and what it kind of resulted in terms of an approach to yourself and how you interact in terms of power structures and self-defense and and, social interactions. What do you think in in Kenpo, which has gone through a lot of changes over the years, and it has a very different approach to how it integrates style, instead of keeping a more rigid learning pattern where this is how it has always been and you will learn it this way, instead of more of tailoring it to the individuals that come in. How do you think that maybe suited you, or do you think that is something that maybe had an effect on how you approached certain things?
I think when I first started Kempo, yes, it was very structured. I think that helped me. That discipline helped me for the Shaolin, because the Kempo, the instructor was, he was French Canadian, and so he didn't have the same traditional roots as if there was like a really traditional Japanese teacher or whatnot. So he was more laid back about it, but yet there was still structure. And the way that he approached it was, he was comedic too. He was able to break the ice and not make it so serious. So there were people that enjoyed his presence and enjoyed training. But it was still, I will say, it was still very difficult to master the moves, but not as difficult as something like Shaolin or Kung Fu, where Kempo karate, you never really master a martial art, but if you're going to enter into a martial art and then learn other martial arts, I would say Kempo karate is the easiest one, because the stances, the muscle memory, the flexibility is not as intensive as something like a Kung Fu. So I would say there's different levels to a martial arts of where someone should start. And whenever I was teaching and people wanted to learn the Shaolin, I would say, well, you probably want to start with something like karate, where at least you can learn power generation, which is very similar to traditional Shaolin Kung Fu, because a lot of the methods from Shaolin Kung Fu were actually evolved into Kempo karate. So there's a lot of Shaolin movements there, but they're higher, they're shallower, they're not as deep rooted stances. So anyone can kind of come in and learn it. But if you want to do Shaolin Kung Fu, I always say you want to start younger, because you want to get that muscle memory of moving in very awkward positions and generating power, and not throwing out your back or blowing out your knees. It's one of those things you want to start young. If you're going to do more of a northern style, I would say Shaolin. Those are the high kicks, those are the animal styles, those are the mantis, which very awkward movement. And so it's good to start that, at a younger age.
Well, you've got some acting credits from a few films. Do you think it was your magic? Do you think it was your martial arts that helped you get into that acting field? Or was it none of those?
I would say it was a combination of both. Because really, I started wanting to do martial arts movies early 20s, like 20 years old, 21. When I went to college, I went to a school, the university was Radford, and they offered a minor in martial arts. So I went and I majored in sports and physical fitness and then minored in martial arts. And I met an individual there, James Houston, who is actually my co-host in Culture Shock. But he was a martial arts instructor, and he owned a gym there where he taught karate. And we met each other on campus. He was visiting, and then I started teaching some Wing Chun and some Shaolin techniques there. And he would go back and forth from Los Angeles, because he was a producer too, producing a TV show called Star Stunts in Action, where he would basically go around seeking out stunt guys and martial artists in Hollywood, and behind the scenes of all of that. So I got to go with him, and I traveled with him to Los Angeles when I was in college, and I learned the ins and outs of Hollywood there through him, going to some of the parties, meeting some of the top stunt guys, and visiting some of their training areas. And that's kind of when I got the bug, and I said, okay, I've got all these skills as a martial artist. I would love to jump in and be in action martial arts movies. So I basically chose to go to Los Angeles to be an action martial arts guy. And that was really where my love of acting came in. And I'd always loved acting ever since I was a kid. I was always dressing up and creating characters around the house. And then, performing for my mother. And it went hand in hand with the magic, because I do a magic trick, but I was playing the part of a magician, and when I was doing the big stage illusions for them. And the same thing with martial arts. Even though it embodied me, I would always dress up in my monk uniform when I was practicing outside in the front yard of my parents' house. And I'd dress up in a Shaolin monk uniform with the socks and everything. And I would, be doing weapons, and, the neighbors probably thought I was crazy, or their child was crazy. I don't know. But I always got very much involved in it. And I think that was something for me that really led into the acting, because I could become these individuals and these characters that I enjoyed being, because it was a part of me. And I was always fascinated by period pieces. And when it came to acting, I didn't like the acting where it's just modern day acting. I loved the movies and the acting where you're playing a character from a different time period. And I think that's why one of my favorite movies was The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise, because I love those settings, and The Patriot with Mel Gibson. I love those period pieces where you can play somebody who, and play in a time that is no longer now. And maybe in a past life, I don't know, I was all these people, and probably that's why I'm so excited about all these different niches and things that I do,
Now, okay, you mentioned Last Samurai. Best
Yep.
best character in the film?
I liked, I liked Tom Cruise's character, but I also liked the teacher as well, the samurai. I forget the actor's name, but I love him.
Watanabe.
Yes, yeah, I love him. He's great.
Yeah, I remember watching that film. I love the director, and he's kind of gold. Anything he touches just works for me. But the Yujo character, just the kind of the man at arms, that was the it's like, it's like the Seven Samurai. I mean, that's like, it's right out of some of those old movies. He just kind of had that presence and that movement, and it's just like, it's so cool.
Yeah.
Underrated movie, I feel like.
Yeah. I love everything about filmmaking where you have a score, the music is affecting everything else. It's just an artistic piece, and so that's why I like period pieces too, because you have that music element that is incorporated in the sets and everything else, and it's just very beautiful to me. So.
Would you say that there's also kind of an overlap between some of your practices between magic and theater? It's a lot of manipulating attention, right? Trying to get your opponent in martial arts to be looking where you want them to look, so that you can land whatever strike you need to land, to pull off the trick, to be able to get the emotional impact of a scene. Same kind of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's almost like you're a ninja, because the ninja used any kind of method to win a fight, whereas the samurai were more honorable, and it was always straight on, and they were, wanted to protect their honor. Whereas, the ninja, they used any kind of method, any kind of magic, throwing dirt, whatever, throwing smoke bombs, and that was the way they won. And so I think when it comes to magic, it's the same kind of thing. You're trying to be a really good liar, basically, because that's what you have to do. And so it is an act. It is your play. You are an actor, because you're trying to talk to somebody here and make them feel like you're engaging with them, so that they'll make eye contact with you. And in that moment, you can do something while they've got your attention. And a lot of times, when there's somebody watching you, so if I'm talking to someone over here in my left shoulder, and there's somebody on my right shoulder who's just staring at my hands, and I know they are, I'll talk to this person on the left, and I'll say, okay, and then I'll turn to him and I say, could you actually take the card? So then now their attention has to look up, and now I'm like, okay, or I'll engage with them in a way that now they have to talk to me. And so now I know everybody else. I know the weakest link is that could basically catch on to what I'm doing is the one watching me. So if you can get him to follow, everyone else around, it's like a group think will begin to follow as well, and they'll all look where I want them to look. So I always make sure to pinpoint the person who's the skeptic, and that's the person you want to focus on, because you get them, all discombobulated. The rest are most likely going to be in that trance, when you're doing a trick. It's a lot of psychology, magic.
Yeah.
So beyond culture shock, is your goal to do multiple seasons of this? Is your goal to get more roles from future projects in Los Angeles, or all of the above?
I think when it comes to the future roles, I'm less concerned about that. For me, I enjoy doing magic for people. I enjoy the travel and the meeting people. If other projects come out of it, then that's great. But the main goal is not to use this message as a way to get all these other projects, because I'm very selective, about anything I do, whether it's acting or any kind of charity project or anything. The message has to be there. It has to be something that that speaks to me, that has some kind of value to it. So for this project, meeting these cultures, meeting these people, doing the magic for them, that's rewarding in itself for me. And also, I feel like it's a good message for them and for everyone else that's watching. So yeah, I think we're hoping for a second season, a third season, and basically just to continue on. We have other projects we want to do that are acting projects too, that I've written and that we've started production on. So we have those to focus on too.
Get that energy going.
Yeah.
What in your travels for this show, what is maybe one of the most surprising locations that you went to that maybe you weren't expecting the locale to be as beautiful as it was, or maybe you had a preconception about how the specific group of people you're going to be interacting with might behave, and it maybe either was completely different, or maybe it was what you expected but in a different way? What's something that kind of opened your eyes and just kind of gave you that moment of awesome appreciation that you can sometimes have on these travels?
That's a tough one, because there's been those moments in almost every country that I've gone to. Peru was fascinating. That's our first episode, but Peru was fascinating simply for the extreme biodiversity. You've got the Andes, and then you have the Amazon, and just being on the Madre de Dia, the river leading up to Palma Real, which is the community we went to deep in the Amazon. That in itself was an experience, just seeing the vast lushness of the Amazon, and then also just the sad truth of a lot of it getting cut down, and seeing the hectares of land just chopped down. But also over in Africa, in Ethiopia, I never expected Ethiopia to have the landscape it did. You go further north, close to Eritrea, and you have the Danakil Depression, which is just considered one of the most remote areas on Earth. And it used to be a very dangerous place because of Eritrea and Ethiopia they were battling each other, and there was war between them and tension. And so there was a time when tourists, you weren't really allowed to go, or you were told not to go because there was kidnappings. People would go missing. There's all these things that could happen there, and it's also an extremely hot area. You have a volcano there, and it's just very barren. And so seeing that to me was just eye-opening up in the north, and then also just in the highlands as well of Ethiopia, where you have the churches that are cut into the mountains. And and I learned that a lot of the priests would climb these mountains and visit these churches that are 5th century churches that are very, very old, cut into the rock formation. And that vista was just so beautiful. And then you go south to Ethiopia, and we traveled all over. But you go south and you have the Omo Valley, which, you know, as you're going through the center, as you're coming down, you know, you see lush forests. So there's jungle, there's forest, and then you're going down to the Omo Valley region, and you're meeting all the tribes. And that's the area that has all the different, you know, the different people. And that to me, I think Ethiopia stood out as just a place where it was just this vast beauty I did not expect to see, with so much going on, you know.
Okay. So, all right. See, I have not had the chance yet to visit several places. I've got this ever growing list of countries that I want to go to and visit. For the newbie that may want to experience a small piece of what you experience, where would you suggest that they start?
I would say a good starting point would probably be Peru, because you can get a lot in Peru safely. You know, you can get guides in the jungle that will take you to safe places, keep you safe. Really, the most important thing is to make sure that who you're with and the company that you're with is safe. And if you want, you know, you can tailor the experience, obviously, to be more adventurous, more rugged, or if you want it to be more like glamping, more accommodated. You know, in Peru, if you're in the Andes region, in Ollantaytambo, they have a lot of interesting, you know, places there. And Ollantaytambo is actually a sacred area in Peru, near Cusco. And, you know, you can have some beautiful hotels with beautiful vistas there. And if it's for people that just want to do a hike and see some of these structures, they can go there. If somebody wants something a little bit more rugged, they can tailor the experience more to Pitamarca, which is a village with a lot of Quechua speaking people. And you can see that. You can do some rock climbing up in the mountains there, or Rainbow Mountain. You can challenge yourself with that, or Machu Picchu. And then if you want to go, you know, into the jungle, there's companies that'll take you there for a more rugged experience, where you're camping in the jungle, or you're staying amongst tribes that have been contacted, so it's not as dangerous. But I would say, because the second place that I went was Ethiopia, and that was a big one, because going to places like that, you really have to do your research. It's a little bit more dangerous. It's a little bit more, you want to make sure you're in great company. You want to have a travel partner with you. Because, I mean, when we were in Ethiopia, there was tribal warfare happening. And there were people getting shot, you know, in the southern Ethiopia. So you really want to be careful when you're traveling to some areas in Africa, and make sure that you have something else under your belt, like going to Peru, where you know you're safe, and you've got that, you know, you get that bug. You want to travel, you want to do something, but go to a place, I call it like a starter country, before you start going to these other places that are a little bit more rugged, a little bit more remote, you know.
Was there a time in your travels where you legitimately felt endangered, or felt that it was just not a safe situation? And that could be, you know, from the other people that were there, or from the landscape or the situation. But was there a time where you're like, I'm not so sure about this?
Yes. I think, yeah, there was that moment. And I think just because of my personality, I weirdly enough, I get excited about all the dangers. So I think it was more people on my team that are like, this is not a good thing, Rich. We need to turn around. And I'm always the guy that says, no, we need to keep going. And I think if I was in a horror movie and it was a real life, I'd probably die first, because I'm the guy that's senseless and decides to go forward. But there was an incident in Sri Lanka where we were in the middle of the Singaraja, I think, the Singaraja rainforest, and I was with my guide. And this is another example of make sure that you do your research, because although my guide was he was a very kind, very good hearted individual, but he spoke very limited English, and I had traveled to Sri Lanka from a different country, and it was actually just on a whim. It wasn't. It was a scouting mission for the show, so we weren't actually filming. So it was just me, and we had just finished filming in Namibia, and then I said to the guys were all going back to the States, and I said, well, you know, I've got a little bit of time. We're going to shoot something in Sri Lanka. I think I'm just going to go over there. And they're like, oh, you're just going to take a flight and go? And I said, yeah, I'm going to find, you know, and this is I didn't do my preparation of, you know, researching. So there was somebody there who told me a name of a possible guide, and they called him and said, okay, can you take Rich around Sri Lanka? So I got in, I met him, and he spoke very limited English. And he drove up in his Prius. He started packing things in, and you know, the one thing about him that I knew was his staple was his pride in his Prius. He was like, this is my chariot. This is, don't you like? This is a perfect vehicle. Yes. And I was like, it's great. That's wonderful. Where are we going? You know, and he was always talking about his car as we were driving. Like, doesn't it drive nice? Doesn't it drive? And I'm like, yes, it's very nice. We need to come up with a plan. And so it was a battle of trying to speak with him and get him to understand where I wanted to go. And he did start taking me to a lot of tourist spots. And I said to him, his name is Chintaka, and he actually stays in touch with me through Facebook. I think he writes me messages. And he said to me, I want to take you to the spots that are most beautiful. And then I said, okay, I want to go to places that most people don't go. Take me to remote places. I want to see the real Sri Lanka. I don't want to go to the tourist spots. So I kind of had to say no tourist, real Sri Lanka. And he was like, oh. And then I kind of stupidly said, dangerous, more, And then he was like, oh, okay, yeah, we go. I understand. And I'm like, okay. So, we start going to these places that are a little bit off the beaten path. And we were in this one village. It was outside Katugla, which is an adventure area where there's a lot of whitewater rafting and, abseiling off of waterfalls and spelunking. And we got lost. I knew we were lost because he was asking people, he would just say, you wait here, sir. I one moment. And then I would watch him scratching his head, talking to the other guy and moving his hands a lot and trying to, and I'm like, I know we're lost. So it's okay. I've got all my camera gear in the back and it is what it is. So he would come back and I would say, Chintaka, you know where we're going? He's like, one moment, we go here, and we pull up the road and he meets some other people. And at this point I got out of the car and we're in the jungle and there's dirt roads. And I wasn't scared at this point, but I remember walking over to a very just rickety shack where people were standing by, I guess, to catch the bus or something. And I looked inside and there was a man who was he was hyperventilating on the floor and there was flies around his mouth and he was, like frothing, like foam, like he was having a seizure and he was just breathing heavy. His stomach was bloated. And I looked at him and I said, okay, this is not good. So I went over to Chintaka. I said, there's a man in there. I think he's dying, because it was very hot and it was very humid, and I was drenched in sweat just stepping outside. It was like a blanket. So Chintaka says, oh, one moment, I check. And he goes and he looks in and he says, oh, that's, he said, very sad. He not make, we go. And I'm like, do we do anything for him? He's like, no, we go, and I'm like, and so people started just watching him. And so I'm walking back to the car. I said, Chintaka, maybe I think we should do something about this. And he's like, no, in Sri Lanka, this is the way we must go. He'd be okay, and I was like, okay. So we got into the car and we continued on. And in the back of my head, I said to myself, oh my God, where are we going? There's people passing out and possibly I maybe saw someone die. I don't know what's happening. And eventually, after talking to a bunch of different motorcyclists, we got to where we were going to go, which was a monastery. I wanted to meet some of the Buddhist monks, and we eventually got there. He just rolled up in the monastery and said, "Oh, this is my family home. I know, I know them. I just don't know. I didn't know how to get here." So that was good. We got to meet all the children monks and the senior monks, and that was a good experience. But getting there, I mean, I just thought we were going to be sleeping in the jungle. It was a disaster, but it was an experience.
Part of the experience.
A little dicey.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of what we deal with is not going to be that dangerous at all, but we like to watch things that are dangerous. We tend to talk a lot about comic books and comic book movies, or at least things that purport to be dangerous in the fictitious sense. Are you a fan? You see, you're a fan of martial arts movies. Are you a fan of comic books at all?
That's the thing. I never got into comic books. As a kid, actually, the only comic book that I read, which is very weird, was Sonic the Hedgehog. I read Sonic the Hedgehog comics, and that was it. That was really it. I didn't read any of the other comics.
That's how I saw the stuff, because I mean, I would think, as with that martial arts background, that's like perfect for today's this. There's so many superhero films. It's like, hey, if you can at least look like you know what you're doing on the screen, you could probably get in at the very least as like Shield Agent number 3 on the side of whatever it was.
Right.
But so I usually like to ask actors that we talk to, it's like, oh, is there ever a comic book character that you would love to play on a television show or a movie?
It's interesting because like I said, I'm very interested in period pieces. So the modern, like the modern trends of movies. I love the movies back in the day, like in the 90s and all those. I like movies even like What's Eating Gilbert Grape. I'm very interested in movies that had a story about human connection to another individual. And they were movies that back then were in theaters that are now going direct to DVD or are now considered independent movies. But back then they were movies you'd watch in a theater. So that, to me, a very personal connection. I like those movies. But going back to the comic book thing, people have said to me, well, you do the martial arts and you do the magic, you should be looking at Gambit, something like that. And so then I was like, oh wait, but who is that? Because I didn't know the comic book world. So I was like,
you don't know Remy LeBeau?
Yeah, so I didn't, and so I looked that up, and I'm like, oh yeah, no, okay, yeah, no, that's me, I can do that, and so so yeah, somebody turned me on to that, like, oh, you need to be doing that, you need to be going out for that guy. And I was like, oh yeah, no, that's actually a lot of what I do. So I would say probably Gambit would be the guy,
Approved. 100% approved.
Yeah.
Well, we like to throw out a random question sometime pertaining to food, usually pizza related, but not always. You're from the East Coast. You mentioned before spending some time in New York. Are you a New York style pizza person? Are you maybe like a Chicago style, or have you discovered something now living on the West Coast that is more your preference?
I love New York pizza, so yeah, I would say New York style. I get some flack from some people where you have the divide of should there be pineapple on the pizza, and I do like the Hawaiian pizza with the ham and the pineapple. So that's something I do like, but New York style is something I enjoy. And when I was in Italy too, I actually really enjoyed the way that traditional Italian pizza is made, because it's very different. It's like a totally different thing than we do over here. So yeah.
More the brick oven style and the different type of crust and simplicity on top.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just a big pizza fan all around. I love pizza. I have to keep it, if I see a slice of pizza, I'm going to want it. I have to kind of keep it at bay because I need to I like to stay in shape for a lot of the stuff I do. And if I could, I just eat pizza every day. So, it's like my kryptonite.
There are worse things.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, do you know when your show is going to be? It's supposed to be in October, right? Do you know exactly when your show is coming out?
I'm told that it'll be the second week of October, and what we're going to do is we'll keep people, updated on the release date on the website that we have, which is cultureshockmagic.com. And so that'll all be updated, and we'll say, oh, it's releasing this date. And so, yeah, we'll be keeping people updated. But it's soon.
Excellent. I got to say, I was going to say, I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. And it will be, it's on Tubi TV, but, well, not so much reruns, but, you can rent the episodes on Vudu too. And then I think local TV, I think it'll be on that too. There's an app. So yeah, it'll be out there for people to watch, the episodes once they've aired. So.
Well, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. I've really enjoyed it, getting a chance to see a dedicated practitioner and doing something that can help us all remember the better parts of ourselves that want to learn and know about people that we may not be completely familiar with and enrich ourselves through that experience. Thank you so much.
Of course. No. Thank you guys. This was great.
Until next time, pudding people. We'll cut that part. You go ahead, Richard. You go there, and
you
we'll
also. And then we're almost.
All right. Until next time. Almost. Yeah. All right.